The Oklahoma City Thunder needed a playoff test like this game was in Minnesota, and they showed you how things can be different this postseason from last postseason on today's Locked On Thunder podcast.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you go check out FanDuel because right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Oklahoma City Thunder needed a challenge like the Minnesota Timberwolves brought tonight in a playoff-like game, and they won it. And they showed you just how different things can be this year compared to last year. SGA was fantastic. Chet Holmgren continues to find his stride on the offensive end, and the Thunder's offense, by and large, got a lot better this game compared to where they were to start this double big lineup. But first and foremost, what a game this was. Look, somebody had to lose this game. It could have been the Thunder. It was Minnesota. But overall, these are the games that make you better. A raucous environment, a nip and tuck game that had 18 lead changes, 4 ties on national television against 2 teams who feel like they can go for a run. The Thunder, of course, the Western Conference favorites, but Minnesota feels like once they get healthy as a team that just went to the conference finals, they'll be right back. They'll be right back there. So this was a critical game. For as good as the Thunder have been, and they've been fantastic, you do want to see yourself compete in these settings when things get tight, when you're not just out-efforting teams, when you're not just blowing out teams from start to finish. Because while that's great, and while that's a massive feather of the Thunder's cap, that unlike other NBA teams, they can get up for all 82. Unlike other NBA teams, they live by the 0-0 mindset. They don't just give you lip service. That's fantastic. But as you saw last year, the playoffs are much different. The playoffs, you never get to just purely out-effort teams in the playoffs. Everybody is trying with all of their might. And in this game, Minnesota treated this differently. Minnesota treated this like a playoff game, and the Thunder rose to that occasion. And there were some really bad things about this game. There were some really awesome things about this game from the Thunder's individual performance, and we're going to get into all of those, the good, the bad, the ugly. But the most important one is that they got tested, and they showed you how they can handle those tests better than they did a year ago. Now, they still have to go out there and do it, right? This was a playoff-like game, not a playoff game. But it gave you a sign of what I think is to come. So the Thunder start this game out, and it's back and forth, but the Thunder grow a 19-point lead, the biggest lead of the game. Minnesota could never get past a 7-point lead. They'd get 7, they'd get 5, 6, and then it'd creep back down. Then they go back up to 5, and it'd creep back down. And that right there is a massive difference. Because with the depth of this team, with all the different ways they can attack you, and you saw them all tonight, they can go small, they can go double big, they can have a single big. The Thunder do not have a sync lineup. Of a lineup you would realistically play in games like this, where, no offense to these guys, but Jay Will gets no minutes, Ousmane Dieng gets no minutes, Dylan Jones gets no minutes. Of the combinations you can put together, there isn't one that just absolutely craters you. And a year ago, there was. This team cratered when Chet Holmgren went to the bench in that Dallas series. The fact that they can stay afloat is massive. And they couldn't stay afloat last year. Because all the Thunder did was they got punched in the mouth and they got up 19. They weren't playing particularly well at the second quarter, middle of the second quarter on. They were not playing well in the third quarter, but they just kept swimming. They just kept floating along the lazy river until SGA was able to come back in and lead this team. And that's no slight to anyone on this roster. That's just the caliber of player Shai is. And every team who has had a player the caliber of Shai all they've ever had to do was just survive until he can come back into the game. And so the Thunder, again, had a lot go wrong. The rebounding disparity is not good. 51-43 at the very end. And there were segments of this game where it felt even worse. That's not good. To make matters worse, the turnovers was 13 all. You cannot get dominated on the glass and not make up for it with your typical huge disparity in turnovers. Like typically the Thunder will turn you over 13, 14, 15, 20 times, and they'll only have 8 themselves. And that can kind of offset the possessions you lose by the rebounding margins. That wasn't the case in this game. In the third quarter, Minnesota was shooting worse than OKC, but they made way more threes. Whenever Minnesota was kind of on that roll there in the third quarter. Like those things you have to nip away at. You have to chip away at. And then that's not been something that's harmed the Thunder through this year. We've talked all year long about how they've been at worst competitive on the boards, and they've even won the rebounding battle some this year as well. And then the turnovers, we know that this is an anomaly. But of course, it was frustrating for the Thunder to be kicking the ball all over the place, and a lot of these 13 were unforced turnovers. And some of these 13, you've got to tip your cap to Minnesota. But for the Thunder to dig deep in this and pull out this win was a gutty performance. And the things we've mentioned so far, just one of the many ways that they've changed. Another way that they've changed is you look at the shooting splits. This was everybody's worst nightmares come true, right? It was a hungry opponent. It was a talented opponent. It was national TV. And a lot of you have been in the comments wondering, can this team rise to the occasion when those are the stakes? Because you think back to that NBA Cup championship. You think back to other moments. You think back to last Thursday when this was the same team, same scenario on the road. And they've came up short in those situations. But you had Isaiah Joe with constant movement and being a movement shooter, which is a stark contrast to what he was last year. Both versions of Isaiah Joe were good three-point shooters. One version is successful against a defense that is locked in, and another version is successful by product of what the defense is displaying, right? The stationary catch-and-shoot stuff is partly just due to the defense not going out and contesting. The movement stuff, you can put the defense in a bind yourself. And that benefit of the early season struggles is bearing fruit right now when you see the threes that Isaiah Joe can hit. Wiggins had a stretch where he hit 3 massive timely triples. This team was not getting timely threes from anybody a season ago. If that trend continues, which from the start of the new year it has, like from the start of the new year till now, Wiggins is shooting the cover off the ball, and he shot timely big shots that you don't win this game without those threes from Aaron Wiggins. Like that's a big change for this roster. And another big change is Alex Caruso. Caruso was stellar. What he does to connect this roster, what he does to play make offensively as a secondary playmaker is everything we talked about in the summertime. A lot of you were pretty upset at those summer podcasts whenever I would call Alex Caruso a better playmaker than Josh Giddey because you weren't hearing the context. Caruso is a better off-ball playmaker than Josh Giddey. Giddey has to play make with the ball in his hands, and he was not afforded that role because his team is too good to put him on the ball. Where Caruso thrives is his ability to connect an offense. Because he's still a threat from three, and the way he can bend the defense with cutting through the action and either providing himself as a safety net as a cutter or getting hockey assists or touch pass assists. Like all those things just flow so much easier with Alex Caruso. I wrote about how he connects this offense on Thunder on SI. I embedded clips to perfectly illustrate what I'm talking about, but you can just watch him be that connective passer this team needs. And so that functionalization this team did not have a year ago. They were kind of winning and being the 1 seed and having a good offense in spite of at times lacking functionality. And so that's a massive difference from where this team was a year ago. And on the flip side, having Caruso gives you such defensive versatility. Like, yeah, this team's defense last year was good. And every metric says that they were a good defense. They weren't the best in the league as they are this year. They weren't a historically good defense as they are this year, but they were good. But they were good because they had Chet Holmgren anchoring things, and they had Lou, and they had Kaysen. And that was kind of the extent of it. Shai being an incredible two-way defender, and a two-way player. He's the best star besides Giannis, right? That can get it done on offense and defense. But now you add Caruso in the mix, and Caruso's active hands and positional versatility for a roster that has Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. You closed a game going small with J-Dub and Caruso as your front court, technically, positionally, but you're switching everything and you're causing havoc. That's just the many ways this team can beat you. So the fact that they can stay afloat, the fact that they're hitting timely threes, and the fact that they have Alex Caruso are big. And there's even more than that we're going to get into coming up, including this whole thing being run by SGA, who he himself has gotten better. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at DoorDash. Go check out DoorDash today because NBA fans, get ready. As they swish, you save thanks to Dash Pass. Every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score with a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more points in the 24-25 regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off in order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. So whether you want a game day feast the next night watching the NBA slate, or you stayed up a little bit too late, now you're behind the 8 ball for lunch tomorrow, well, you can make a quick and easy decision for lunch the next day with Dash Pass. They can get your favorite meals with $0 delivery free and reduced service prices. Plus now, save even more with this exclusive NBA offer the next day if you sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. So you have to have a Dash Pass account, but when a player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off in order the next day, up to $10 off just by using promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after the 50-point game. For eligible orders at participating locations, must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms and conditions apply. Again, visit DoorDash to learn more. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. What a game this was. What a win this was for Oklahoma City. And what a difference a year makes, where the Thunder are once again the 1 seed, this time running away with it, and they just got a playoff-like win. 55, 54, 75 shooting splits for OKC. They held Minnesota to 43, 40, and 96 shooting splits. The Thunder 1 points in the paint, 46-32. Lost second chance points in a big way, 28-15. And 1 fast break points, 23-14. So there was a lot of good about this game. And one of the biggest things was SGA. The biggest thing was SGA. This team went as he went. They started slow before their first time out because Clark made life difficult on him, and the thing kind of unraveled. They went on a run to grow that 19-point lead because of SGA. They had a little bit of a stumble in the third quarter before Clark sadly got hurt because Clark was making life hard on SGA. And then in the fourth quarter, things sputtered offensively. But then once Shai came back in the game, they got control of the contest. Because SGA has taken another step this season. Now, that's not to say he wasn't good last year, because he was excellent in the playoffs last year. He was excellent against New Orleans, who wasn't. He was excellent against Dallas, a lot weren't. And this season, I think he's an improved defender. I know he's an improved playmaker. And as a scorer, he continues to be just unguardable. And there are certain guys who can do better on him than others, including one Jalen Clark, who for the second straight game has been really, really good. But when he steps on the floor, we talk about superstars making their teammates better. And moments like this fourth quarter are what is going to bring Shai to that conversation and get him a seat at the table. Because I think that this is going to keep happening in the postseason. Now, again, could be wrong. Have been wrong before. I thought Darius Bazley would be awesome. But what you saw of the comfortability of his role players in that fourth quarter is a stark difference from last year. And Shai himself has talked about it. In his own words, Shai's taken ownership for not preparing his guys enough for the playoffs last regular season. And he's made the conscious effort to do so this season. And it paid off in this fourth quarter. J-Dub was a heck of a lot better with Shai on the floor in that fourth quarter. This team was a heck of a lot better in the fourth quarter with Shai on the floor, which is no surprise for the MVP. But this is what stars do. They rise the tide for a team, for an offense, and for a defense. Like those fourth quarter blocks from Shai. Again, you don't win these games without those stops. Ripping the ball away from Darren Shannon. You do not win this game without the 3 steals and 3 blocks from SGA. You just don't. You also don't win the game without Shai's 37 points. And Shai was just flat out unguardable. And there's a different demeanor about Shai this year. He's always been stoic, but there's a different sense of security of like being in control of the game, being in control of the offense, being in control of his teammates, and that leadership component, which I think leadership, we often think of like giving a rah-rah speech in the locker room, right? Go win one for the Gipper. But leadership can be expounded in different ways. One of them is, listen, if Shai's going to go play defense that way and exert effort to that degree defensively, who do you think you are if you're not on the floor with him? So that rises the tides of his teammates. Shai's gravity and ability to take on traps and take on double teams and navigate through that, buy some time and find you an open shot, you better go hit it. And they do. And they have so far this season. That's got to continue in the playoffs. But again, if we're projecting, I think by the end of the playoffs, we're going to talk about Shai as a guy who makes his teammates better. Who, yes, is a great individual talent, but also is a great team player. He's a great winner. He's a great everything. Now, you got to go do it first before the, national consensus catches up to that. But anybody watching this team can see all those factors, no matter if they go and win the NBA Finals this year or if they don't. Anybody watching this team can see all that. And that's what Shai's doing. But I also thought that the Thunder really found their stride offensively. And it's not just the 130 points, although that does help. It's not just the efficiency of 55% shooting from the floor, although that does help. It's the amount of options on any given play that they have. I go back and watch every single game after the buzzer, right? The next morning, I'll go back and watch the full game on Synergy, no commercials, no free throws, all that good stuff. And you notice in that second viewing especially, all the different ways that the Thunder could have scored. And this is a big difference from other successful NBA teams, from other teams currently playing. Like sometimes you go back and watch a game and like a lot of these points came off of difficult shot making from their stars. With the Thunder, there was a clip that I put in that Alex Caruso story of Caruso didn't touch the ball, but what he did was he replaced Lou Dort in the corner, and Lou Dort slid up to the slot, and Caruso's wide open in the corner. But Chet was flashing in the paint. He's wide open too. So they dumped the ball to Chet. And Caruso then cuts baseline. And Caruso's wide open, cutting baseline to the rim behind the defense. But guess what? Chet's also wide open. And the defense is now reacting to Caruso cutting, and now Lou Dort's wide open at the slot. So there's 3 people open on the court because of otherwise unnoticed or simple actions, right? Or simple movement. But it's all simple yet functional movement that's bending the defense. And so you can see how this Thunder team operates, how they thrive, how they get to their spots, how they get open looks. And many a time, it's not just Shai bailing them out with tough buckets. Now, does he hit tough buckets? He absolutely does. But through the course of that 48-minute game, there's times where they score where, again, for that example, Chet did hit a mid-range jumper and look like Dirk. That's great. But you had 2 other open guys with you. It's not a bad shot for Chet to take because he was open. He received the ball high. He shot over the defense. It was a great play by Chet. But it illustrates how everyone on the floor is playing a part to get open, and how if you get an incredible closeout to Chet, right, and the rim defender steps up onto that Chet mid-range, he can pass over you and dump the ball off to Alex Caruso. He just did not need it in that example. And so when we're talking about differences from last year's playoff to this year's playoff, that's one of them too. Because when the defenses got tighter, when the defenses played on a string better, when the defenses got more connective and physical, the Thunder didn't have all those options. And this year, with players like Caruso and players who have gotten a year older and have seen the pictures now and have been in those playoff moments now, you're seeing a difference. You're seeing an improvement. And so all you can do now is hurry up and wait. Because listen, here's the secret for you. There's no need to get upset at Brian Windhorst whenever he says that the league doesn't respect the Thunder, or get upset whenever Matt Moore on our Locked On NBA squad shows pokes holes at the Thunder, rightfully so, because the secret is, in this business, you're mostly going to be right when you lean and skew to that negative portion of all of this. Because only one team can go win. It's a tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme. I'll use the two examples of the two recent champions to make it quick. When Jokic lost in the first round, oh, he's just another soft Euro player that can't win in the playoffs. You can't build a team around Jokic. You can't build a team around this porous defender. You can't build a team around this guy who does all these dazzling things offensively but can't go get you a bucket whenever you need one. He goes and wins a championship the next year, and all of a sudden, Denver's looked upon as a future dynasty, which hasn't materialized yet. But all of a sudden, Denver is talked about a little bit more favorably than OKC, despite the products on the floor. And then the biggest example, and an example that more so mirrors the Thunder, is how many times did the Celtics get to the second round in East Finals and fail? And they kept failing, quote unquote failing, right? And last year in December, right? November, October, September of last year, there was all these conversations about, can you really win with the Jays? Oh, yeah, the regular season stuff's cool, but can you win with the Jays? You got to trade one of Brown or Tatum. Who should you hitch your wagon to? Now they go win it, and all of a sudden, they win it. They're a future dynasty. And everything that they do this year, despite the Cavs' success, is swept under the rug. And they say, well, the Celtics are going to be fine in the playoffs, which I agree with. I think that the Celtics are going to be back in the NBA Finals. But they didn't have that benefit of the doubt until they actually did it. Even though the roster didn't change, right, in terms of at the top, the talent level of Tatum and Brown and how they meshed together didn't change. All that changed was the ball bounced their way. They survived a 3-month process to crown a champion. And they actually did it. But they were just as good the year before. They were just as talented. They were just as threatening. So, all that to say that everyone's going to keep doubting this Thunder team. And there are question marks about this Thunder team, including in this game. But you can't get caught up in all of that stuff, because that's just the nature of the business of it. Just go ahead and make sure that you lean negative on everybody. And I mean, including on the squad show last year, like there was a question about if the Celtics were a success and they won the title. It's like, that's just the nature of the game, of what's going to happen. That's the nature of how the media machine works. So for now, just enjoy the Thunder team. We'll see what happens. We'll see if they actually pull it off or not. But indicators like tonight should go a long way in validating, your feelings of how good this Thunder team is. But the toughest part's going to be actually putting it together for a 3-month long run. We'll talk about that coming up. But first, I want to say right now, but a good friend over at FanDuel, go check out FanDuel, because when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on the action than at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, and that way you never miss out on the action, including during live action. If you miss opening tip, guess what? You can bet on fourth quarter comebacks, so that way you can stay engaged in games no matter how they're going on the court. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine live bets in the same game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. That's just betting $5. If it hits, you get $150 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com right now. Go check them out today. Make every moment more with our sports betting partner of the official sports book of the NBA at FanDuel.com, where in tomorrow's game against Minnesota, the Thunder are 12.5-point favorites against Minnesota on the second night of a back-to-back. That's a pretty steep line. We'll tell you why coming up. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. What a game that was. What a challenge that was. Now, it was not all incredible. And that's where I think that one of the biggest changes happened for this team. The ability to handle those moments of adversity and, again, stay afloat was the difference in the game tonight. And this was a Timberwolves team that had a ton of injuries, including during this game. No Randall, no Rudy, no DiVincenzo, and their difference maker, like their switcher of the flip, which was Jalen Clark, he got hurt. He took a hard fall, and hopefully he's going to be okay. But the Thunder still won the game. They still gutted it out. It was a playoff-like feel in this one. They withstood Nickeil Alexander-Walker going 4 for 7 from 3. They withstood a 29-point game from Ant. Another incredible Naz Reid game. And like the Naz Reid archetype is going to continue to work against Oklahoma City. Him, PJ Washington, like that archetype is difficult to cover for the Thunder, especially when they hit their threes. And Naz Reid went 3 for 9 tonight. Got 22 points. Like that's a difficult archetype. So the question for the viewpoint of like, is Minnesota a contender? I think fully rests on your belief in Chris Finch. And it's a difficult conversation to have in Minnesota. It's a difficult conversation to have for the coaching staff, front office, ownership. Go check out Locked On Timberwolves to hear how they're, kind of grappling with it. I know Rudy and his contract. I know Julius Randle and his contract, and that you traded Cat for him. So like it's a optics thing a little bit with what this looks like in the playoffs for them. But to compete with the Thunder, to try to pull off an upset of the 1 seed, if these two teams meet in the playoffs, you gotta roll with this lineup more often than not. I'm not saying never play Rudy, because Rudy's an excellent rim protector. I would argue you shouldn't play Randall, but I get it. Optics, like it's hard to literally play him 0 minutes. But more often than not, this group has to be on the floor. The starting 5 tonight, shuffle in, of course, Nickeil. Like that has to be your group. Because with that, like with a healthy Clark, this team is really talented. And specifically, Stiles making fights and the playoffs being mostly matchup dependent. This is a tough matchup for the Thunder. Not a impossible hurdle to clear. Like I think that the Thunder would still win a playoff series, even if Chris Finch ran the rotations that we're talking about. But man, would it be tough. Man, would it go 6-7 games. And there's very few teams in the West that you can look at and say on paper should or will take the Thunder 6-7 games. And this iteration of the Timberwolves absolutely could. So it comes down to, do you trust Chris Finch that even whenever they're healthy to play this iteration of them? That's the $1 million question, right? That's the $1 million question. And play this iteration before it's too late. Because we've seen optics before hurt teams, including, in Oklahoma City. Like when the answer was clear about Jeremy Grant, like this stuff just happens. It happens naturally. It happens in the course of series. And sometimes you make the adjustments proactively. Sometimes you make the adjustments reactively. And the timing of those chess moves are ever important. And that's why you get paid the big bucks to pace the sidelines. So I think Minnesota is a threat. And I said this on Dream Team, Locked On Thunder, everywhere with a microphone. Like I think that they're a threat, including Locked On NBA yesterday. I think that they're a threat so long as they can play this way. Now, as far as tomorrow's game goes, we'll probably still be talking about this game tomorrow, but also we'll have a fresh game to talk about. I think tomorrow's game is less so about who's the better team, less so about who's the better roster, who's the better, who's favored in a playoff series and all these things. I think that you got all that out of the way tonight. Like if you want to make big sweeping takeaways from these two teams, you can do it in a way based upon this game that I don't think you can do next game on Monday. I think that whoever wins tomorrow, all that can be said, even if the Thunder win, all that can be said is they were the grittier team, because this is brutal. This is brutal. A back-to-back with travel in less than 24 hours. Less than 24 hours from the tip. This game tipped off at 8:50. Monday tips off 7 p.m. in a different city, same team. And then you look at the injury reports, right? Like you would imagine Chet will rest Monday. I don't know that, but you just, like, imagine it will. It'll change the rotations a little bit. You would imagine that, like, Clark won't play. I hope he recovers. I hope he can play, because I really want to see Shai continue to problem solve the traits that Jaylen Clark has to kind of be more physical with him, be so athletic to blitz him and to trap him and then stay with him whenever Shai breaks that pressure. Like I would love to see Jaylen Clark play, but I don't know how you avoid concussion protocol after that fall. So, like, a lot of different things will move and shift from this game, that I think that tomorrow's game is less about a test of who's more talented and who's a better basketball team, but more so who can handle this adversity the best, who can withstand the grueling nature of the travel schedule, who can withstand the changing of their rotations, who can withstand and get up for a game with such a quick turnaround. That's why I think that 12.5 is crazy. I think that the Thunder could absolutely win the game, but to blow out Minnesota, I don't know that they're going to blow them out. I don't know that Minnesota will blow out the Thunder. I don't think that there's going to be a great feel for, like, blowing somebody out. I think it's going to be a sloppy rock fight. I think that the offenses, you'll have bad legs for shooters. You'll probably have some careless turnovers, and it could make for a disgusting watch. But who can play in the mud, who can get out of the mud, will be the question for tomorrow's game. But tonight's game, man, it was excellent basketball. And somebody had to lose it. It sucks for Minnesota that they were the ones that had to lose it. But as a basketball fan, if you take off the blue and orange colored glasses, sign everybody up for a 7-game series between these two teams. Because it would be absolute cinema, as the kids say. Do the kids still say that? Absolute cinema, if the kids still say that. So we'll have the Timberwolves recap part 2 on tomorrow's show, recapping Monday's slate. And then we'll get into our normal week after this weird schedule quirk from the NBA. Go follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO Thunderpod. And until tomorrow, be good to one another.